Yes or no, the laws of supply and demand, if there are more people applying for a job, does that increase or decrease the wages?
It can do both. How did the open borders policy drive real wages down?
Bringing
no, inflation, excuse me.
It brought real wages down by bringing in competition for labor.
And you would back that up. Where are you getting this data?
This is the laws of supply and demand. If there are more workers, then wages decrease.
If there are more workers, then
Correct.
wages decrease.
Yes. You disagree?
Well, look, I think that, yeah, it's potentially you could have less workers, wages increase, less workers, wages decrease. We had less workers during COVID when we had Remain in Mexico still in place. There were less workers, and we saw wages dropped, right?
Less workers and wages drop. Well, there could be other reasons. You just said that wages went real quick. Wait. You just said that real wage growth.
Wait, hold on, just real quick. So supply and demand isn't always like a universal principle then.
Well, no, right? It seems to more often than not be a principle, and you contradict yourself. You just said that wages went up when we had Remain in Mexico at the end of 2020.
No, I said they went down.
Your entire argument, you pointed to that.
And then they went down.
Your argument.
And then they went down. So it's both.
When did they go down? When did they start going down?
When was that? Q4 of 20 or Q1 of 2021, I think.
Okay, Q1 of 2021. So that would be Biden's first term?
Yeah.
So you mean when Biden on day one had an influx of people crossing the border because he proudly announced rescinding Remain in Mexico, you're using that as evidence that Remain in Mexico drove down wages?
I'm not making a claim at all. I'm actually just testing the logic there. You said that if there are more people working, that you will have higher wages. Is that right?
That is what I said. No, I said if you have more competition for labor, it drives down wages.
Okay. Well, I don't think that this graph proves that one way or the other. Would you agree with that?
I don't think that your graph's seeking to prove that. I think, however, the way that you interpreted it would show that you were exact opposite of what you were interpreting. Your argument was, well, Remain in Mexico meant that there were less people for labor, and yet wages were going down. And then what you showed is your graph shows once Remain in Mexico was removed, wages went from going up to going down.
But why did those wages go up, though?
The wages probably went up because the specific jobs that we were looking at for the people that were counting as wages were jobs that tend to make more money. And so we probably got rid of, through calling people non-essential, a bunch of low-wage work.
People lost, low-wage workers lost their jobs, right?
Correct. Okay.
Right.
All right. So what's that have to do with Remain in Mexico meant that wages, that was your claim. That was your claim.
But what you're trying to prove right now is that Joe Biden caused inflation.
What I'm saying is that, yes, that the policies of Joe Biden, the buck stops with him. The policies he's had of increasing the labor.
No. I need to know why. I need
because the laws of supply and demand. Because the laws of supply and demand. Yes or no? Would you?
How did that drive up
you can articulate
inflation?
Afterwards if you can.
How did that drive up inflation?
Stop. Go ahead, Rob.
Yes or no? The laws of supply and demand. If there are more people applying for a job, does that increase or decrease the wages?
It can do both.
Explain how it could increase the wage.
Because wages
increase the wage.
Because wages are set by the employer.
Okay, so
it's not perfect.
Okay, so the employer, right? If there's only one person that applies for the job and they really need that, then that person's able to negotiate a better salary or a better wage because there's nowhere else for the employee to go, correct?
Maybe.
Okay, give me the circumstance when that's not the case.
When the employer says no.
Okay, the employee says no. Is that normally how businesses would work?
I've never once went into a job interview where I was able to negotiate my salary. Never once.
I think that this is nonsensical. What you're doing is saying that there could be some sort of exceptions to the rule. But would you agree that overwhelmingly that if you have more of a supply of something, that decreases the demand?
If you have more of a supply,
correct.
If people want it.
Okay. Do people want labor?
You could have a supply. Well, I don't know. Because we have people that are unemployed. We also have 10 million jobs that are sitting there unfilled. I don't know.
Okay, I'll just say that with this whole conversation, I'll just say this. It's clear that wage growth was higher in Trump's second term than it was. It was clear that real wage growth was higher under Trump's second term than it was under even the best years of Harris Biden. It's clear that Trump's real wage growth was better the entirety of Trump's first term than it was under Biden Harris, which is a reason economically to prefer. The Biden administration, along with Kamala Harris, gaslit people that the economy was great. It wasn't. People were struggling, and that's one of the primary reasons that they voted for Trump.
Great. Now, how did Joe Biden raise inflation?
Because he massively imported a bunch of people, which drove down.
And how did that drive up inflation?
Increases the supply of workers, which lowers their wage.
Do you have any evidence to back that up?
Yes, the law of supply and demand.
Feelings?
Second,
that doesn't. The law of supply and demand
yes,
is not
correct.
a sufficient answer for me. I'm going to need some data on this, Rob.
Yeah, that's the data that we could see. Study after study shows that when you increase the amount of labor, pretty much every study that's ever been done on economics shows that when you increase the supply of labor.
COVID?
Okay, why would COVID be? Why would COVID all of a sudden take away the laws of supply and demand?
Because what you need to do, Rob, is you need to explain how the whole fucking world had global inflation, but somehow it was Joe Biden's fault here. And so far, what you've come up with is the law of supply and demand. And I'm asking just for some data.
Okay, so what I started to do was talk about the policies that Biden issued that would have lowered real wage growth. You demanded that I stop at the first one, which I did. Now that I've successfully showed you that that's a logic of supply and demand, I'll move on to the second, which was the massive spending that was done under Joe Biden, and that the Democrats, I'll admit that Trump's responsible for some of this in his first term, as is Republicans, but Democrats certainly wanted to spend more and embrace more lockdowns. Those sort of things are what led to supply chain crushes and our economy stagnated, as people like me predicted. I'm sure that you cheered on lockdowns. I was against it because I said that this is going to cause massive inflation and supply chain crushes, which it did, and it was worse under Joe Biden.
There's that straw man position to make yours seem sane. I would like to once again point out you have shown no evidence that that for some reason our inflation was different than everybody else's. That our inflation. Now, I would grant you that stimulus does raise inflation. I would grant you that, and I would say that both presidents were doing that, and I would also say that you'd be hard pressed to convince me that Trump wasn't going to offer stimulus those other two times as well. But what we also see is that recovery drove down inflation eventually, and we got it back on track, right?
Now, so I find it funny that you say.
Why wouldn't we say that those were deflationary policies?
Well, I don't understand.
Drove inflation down.
I don't understand why you ask a question, then immediately start talking again before I get a chance. So you
don't
interrupt
wait. Because you don't wait. You just got to wait a second.
So you ask a question, then I wait to make sure that you're not going to further.
I don't know about that one.
I mean,
RTP, I am agreeable with Rob on that because he'll ask and then he'll start to answer it, and then you're like, and then.
Yeah, what I do
go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I'll say it and then I'll reframe it so that you don't. So it's not like you don't have to remember everything I said. It's just illustrating that main point.
Can you hold up that sign that says reframing the question? Can you hold that one up for yourself? Go ahead. I'll wait for you.
It's reframe the argument,
okay.
But I didn't reframe my own argument.
Thanks so much.
I reframed the question, and this says argument.
All right.
Okay, thanks so much.
Well, hold on, and I'll say it this way, RDB. You're assuming he doesn't hear the question in what you're saying, and then you're taking more time to repeat that and reframe it. So let's try not to do that because Rob, I'm sure, is comprehensive enough to pick up what you're putting down. Rob,
I don't think so, Sarah. He is every time I say something, he fucks it up. So I'm trying to be very clear with my words so that I don't have to hold up this goddamn sign.
And then we come back for clarification
so
if it's needed. We come back for clarification if it's needed. All right, go ahead, Rob.
Okay, so these lockdown policies and the massive stimulus policies of Joe Biden, first off, when you say, why wouldn't we consider them deflationary? Again, it's very interesting when we talk about the record of Joe Biden and the massive inflation, you're like, we can't count any of that. That was all outside of his scope. Even in year 4, we have to say that was because of COVID. But we can assume that his policies made inflation worse than they otherwise would have been, which is a nonsensical argument. What we could see is when it comes to the rest of the world, the reason that there was inflation in the rest of the world is because they also embraced these terrible policies, such as the lockdown policies and massive stimulus. And it's even worse for those countries because the United States is the world reserve currency, which means that if the US dollar is devalued, it doesn't just cause inflation in the United States because this is the reserve currency. That means it would also cause inflation around the world. So a country, for example, like Germany would not only have to rely on the US being the reserve currency and the inflation that comes from devaluing the US dollar, but then also devaluing of their currency on top of that. So that's why that we saw inflation around the rest of the world that was commiserate to what was happening in the United States, but it's still on balance worse in the United States because we had the advantage during the Biden presidency of being the world reserve currency.
Great. So when we did the Inflation Reduction Act and it brought inflation down, you're saying that it's not right.
When was the Inflation Reduction Act?
I can look when it was passed. Do you know off the top of your head?
I thought they named these differently. My guess would be 2021.
2022. So it went into effect 2023.
Okay.
And inflation went down.
Okay. When was it passed in 2022, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't have the date on it. If anybody else has it on there.
Okay. Let me see if I can find this.
I think what I'm trying to nail down here is I would love a specific outside of like generically you just saying what you think. I think if you were being honest right now, Rob, what you would say is you're not really sure which policies drove up inflation, and that you just have like this general understanding of supply side economics, and you think that everything works inside of a supply side economics perfectly, and that's a sufficient argument. I'm just saying that's not a sufficient argument. This entire thing, like in order for you to justify the wage differences between Trump and Biden, you've got to explain this. You've got to explain inflation, and you're not doing a very good job with it.
I am explaining it. I have explained how stimulus and lockdowns that were done more by the Democrats and Joe Biden are actually worse for causing these sort of things to occur. I think that what you're seeing is that you can't defend the record of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
I don't have to.
You do when we're saying who would have been better. We already went through this at the beginning. And so when we're comparing Donald Trump to a Harris presidency, when she admitted I would have done nothing different than Joe Biden, it's reasonable to extrapolate that her economic policies would have been the same. And what you want to do is give an excuse to all of Joe Biden's policies. I'm saying that we could see that real wage growth is up better than any time it was under the Biden administration in Trump's second administration. And that's something to cheer for. That's more important than things like GDP or wage growth that doesn't include inflation. And so people's standard of living is marginally increasing. That's the argument I'm making. I think that I'm clearly winning the economic argument. I have like 10 other arguments to get to if you'd like to get to other arguments, but you're going to say Trump doesn't matter to any of those, which is funny. This is the one area of disagreement you had, and I don't think you're doing so well.
Well, it's ironic that you're giving Trump now credit for the real wage growth now. None of his policies are in place. We're still under the policies of Joe Biden for this real wage growth under Trump. But you're ready to give Trump credit for the real wage growth in these 6 months when clearly like his policies haven't gone into effect yet. So that's him, right? He gets the credit for Joe Biden's wage growth right now. Joe Biden takes all the heat for COVID. And Trump doesn't have to take any heat for COVID. Like, if you could just take his dick out of your mouth for like 12 seconds and look at something from a 50,000-foot view and look down and say, like, oh, are there extenuating circumstances? Sometimes. But you don't do that. You just you guys all want to circle jerk Donald Trump. I don't think that you have made a compelling argument at all that he's a better president. The only way you could do it is if you factor in a fucking global pandemic. And even then, I think you're struggling. Like anybody watching this is going to have a hard time coming up here, Rob, and repeating what you're saying. They're not going to be able to repeat your argument. It's nonsensical.
Someone sent me a clip of this. I don't normally consume your content, but is it true that the other day you were complaining about the prices of things like steaks and other things like that at your local grocers?
No, what I was talking about was the tariffs, the willy-nilly tariffs that are slapped on places like Brazil that drive up the prices of beef.
Oh, so what you were saying is when you were complaining about the prices, you're saying that specifically the negatives that you see in the economy right now is Trump's fault, but the positives are Biden's fault? That's your argument?
No, I didn't make the argument that the positives were Biden. You made those arguments. But I would say, and that's a silly fucking
what
thing
are you talking about? I never said that.